lecture, we will see key concepts that allow us to design organizational units of a company. In particular, we will talk about hierarchy, span of control, and line and staff distinction. First of all, it is important to define what an organizational unit is. The organizational unit is the building block of a company at the macro level, and it is defined as a set of positions or roles that are relatively stable over time, that have interdependent or similar tasks, and that are overall autonomous and measurable. Examples of organizational units are the production department, the sales department, or the IT department. Why do we create organizational units with such characteristics? First, to facilitate coordination. With organizational units, managing people and standardization of activities is easier because we can build on a common coordination system. Second, with stable organizational units, we provide people with a certain level of stability within the organization, allowing people to develop a joint culture. To describe the macro structure and the different organizational units of the organization, we use the organizational chart, which is the graphical representation of the organizational units, which of course are the boxes of the chart, and of the hierarchical relationship between them. The organizational chart is a model, and as all the model is a simplified picture of the reality. Therefore, it is not always complete and 100% representative of the company. It is a useful tool to represent the organizational choices and the organizational design of the company at the macro level. There are two key dimensions to define: the horizontal dimension and the vertical dimension. The horizontal dimension refers mainly to the span of control. Span of control is defined by the number of different positions that are directly controlled by the supervisor. For example, if in a plant there are 10 production teams and each team has a team leader, the plant manager directly supervises the 10 team leaders, and so we can say that her span of control is equal to 10. The span of control should be adequate in number, so to guarantee a proper coordination from the supervisor. The more people to supervise you have, the more complex number of relationships you have to manage, and consequently the coordination becomes more difficult. But it is important to underline that there is no one ideal number of people to supervise. The adequate dimension of span of control depends on different aspects. First, the complexity and the level of interdependence among different tasks and jobs. The higher the complexity and the interdependence, the more difficult it is to control and coordinate activities, and the ability to supervise and coordinate tend to decrease, bringing to the need of having a small span of control. Second, we need to consider also the level of centralization of decision-making. If the company is characterized by a high level of centralization, we will have a small span of control. If instead the people are more autonomous, the span of control will be higher. Similarly, the use of coordination mechanisms at the micro level, such as standardization of processes, outputs, and competencies, and at the macro level, such as information systems and control systems, will allow a higher span of control. Finally, leadership and management style may bring to a different span of control. The second dimension is the vertical one, and refers to the hierarchical chain, in particular to its length. The length of the hierarchical chain is represented by the number of the hierarchical levels between the top management and the lowest level in the organization. Of course, this concept can be applied when the organization is using the principle of unit of command, that assumes that there is just one report for any people within the organization. You will see in other lectures that we may have organizational structures that denies this principle. Span of control and length of the hierarchical chain are strictly interrelated. When you have a small span of control, you tend to have a longer hierarchical chain with a vertical organizational structure. When you have broader span of control, you tend to have a lower number of hierarchical levels with a horizontal organizational structure. The main decision to take is to balance on one hand the need to have a span of control that allows us to govern and manage the activities, but at the same time a length of the organizational chain that reduces as much as possible the cost of the structure and the length of the decision-making process. In fact, the more hierarchical levels we have, the more supervisor we have and the more supervisor salary we have to pay. Moreover, if the hierarchical chain is long, the decision-making process will be slower because of the potential need to consult all the levels of the chain. Finally, another important distinction to cite is that general organizational units are classified on the basis of the type of activities that are performed. In particular, we distinguish between line units and staff units. Line units are those units that deal with the core business of the company, such as production, R&D, sales and marketing. These units are placed along the hierarchical chain of the organizational chart. On the other hand, staff units are those units that support line units by providing specific support and development services to core units. The typical example of staff unit is the Human Resource Management department, that typically support all the core units in the HRM processes, providing specific competencies. Other typical examples of staff units are the ICT department or the legal department. It is important to understand that staff units can be placed at different levels within the organizational chart. They can be at the higher level of the organization, so to support all the other organizational units with a specific support. Again, HRM is the typical example of such a staff unit. Or they can be placed more in the lower levels of the organizational chart, supporting just a few organizational units at the line level. For example, we may have a legal staff unit that is dedicated to support the R&D department in terms of licensing and patents, providing dedicated specialized competence. To conclude, we can say that span of control, length of hierarchical chain, and line versus staff units are the three main drivers that define the shape of the organizational structure at the macro level.